It was my son Michael's 45th birthday, and I had arrived at his house early with the cake I'd ordered specially from his favorite bakery. $800 red velvet he had always loved. For my only child, nothing was too expensive. I knocked with a smile, expecting to see his face light up as it did in his youth. But when he opened the door, his expression was pure annoyance. A dismissive "Oh, it's you" was my greeting. I tried to push past the hurt, holding out the cake with its candles already in place, wishing him a happy birthday, and reminding him of the childhood favorite I carried. He sighed as if my very presence was a burden, let me inside without a thank you, and sat me down in the living room of the beautiful home I had financed for him and his wife Sarah. A $50,000 down payment pulled from the life savings I'd built over 40 years as a machinist. In a cold voice that had become familiar over recent years, he told me he'd been thinking about what would truly make him happy. I nodded enthusiastically, offering a trip, new tools, even the new truck he mentioned. Then he looked me straight in the eye with pure contempt and said the words that would shatter my world. The one thing he loved most as a birthday present was for me to die. I felt my heart ripped from my chest. My own son, I whispered, asking what he had just said, tears welling in my eyes. He confirmed it with a coldness that cut like knives, telling me he was tired of me, my calls, my visits, my constant presence. His life would be easier and happier if I disappeared. My hands shook uncontrollably. 72 years of life, 45 years of fatherhood, and I never imagined I would hear those words. I saw that I was his father, that I had given him everything, sacrificed everything. He interrupted, saying that was exactly the problem, that he was suffocating, that he needed freedom from my drama and emotional needs. The cake grew heavy in my hands, the candles beginning to melt, all my dreams for the day hugs. Laughter, a family dinner vanishing like smoke. I tried one last time, saying I just wanted to be close to him, to be part of his life, that he was all I had. He said that was a problem, that I needed to get a life of my own and leave him alone. I walked to the door, each step feeling like it cost me a year of my life, turned for one last look hoping to see the little boy I knew, but saw only impatience for me to leave. I murmured a final happy birthday, Michael, and walked out, closing the door on the man I had been. I returned to my small apartment with a broken heart and trembling legs, throwing the $200 cake in the trash, the melted candles mirroring my endless tears. I sat in my old armchair, the same one where I'd fed him as a baby, read him stories, and cried happy tears when he called me dad, wondering how I had ended up here, how my own son could wish me dead with such coldness. I began to remember everything I had done for him over 45 years. When he was 3 and broke his arm, I worked triple shifts to pay the $1 to 100 in bills my insurance didn't cover, money I got from selling my late father's watch collection. When he turned 16 and wanted a car, I worked weekends for 6 months to buy him a $4,000 used sedan, his eyes sparkling as he took the keys, hugging me tight and calling me the best. When he changed his college major for the 3rd time, I paid every semester without complaint $40 to $1,000 total, from a second mortgage on my house, always telling him not to worry, that his education was most important. When he married Sarah, I paid $35,000 for his dream wedding, signing check after check so my boy could have everything. Then came the house, the very one where he just humiliated me. A $150,000 down payment from my retirement savings. It didn't stop there. When the twins arrived 5 years ago, I became the free babysitter, always available when they needed me. When Sarah lost her job last year, I paid the $16,000 mortgage for 8 months. Money from my pension that meant I ate simple meals for weeks. When the twins needed braces, I covered another $4,000 without a second thought, telling them not to worry. That's what grandparents are for. I went to my desk and pulled out boxes of receipts, not kept out of mistrust, but as proud proof of all I'd done. I did the math, raising him to $100,000. College, $40,000 to $1,000. Wedding, $35,000. House down payment, $150,000. Mortgage payments, $16,000. Braces for $1,000. Gifts over the years, at least $10,000 more. The total was over $460,000, almost $500,000 invested in his happiness. All to hear his greatest desire was my death. Tears fell on the papers as I calculated that, with compound interest, that money could have been over $600,000, enough for a nice house, world travel, a comfortable retirement, instead of counting pennies in my tiny apartment. But I had chosen to invest in love, believing every sacrifice was worth it for a son who would love and care for me in my old age. How foolish I had been. I called him, needing to hear his voice to confirm the terrible truth. He answered with annoyance, asking what I wanted. I asked if he meant what he said. He said of course he did, that it was time I understood he needed space, that my obsession wasn't healthy. I repeated the word obsession, incredulous that he called a father's love that. He said yes, and he hoped I finally got the message. I hung up without goodbye. There was no misunderstanding. That night, I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, remembering every beautiful moment, every I love you, Dad, wondering if it was all a lie or if I'd raised a son so selfish he couldn't see beyond his own needs. At 3 a.m., something changed. The sadness turned to anger, indignation, a clear understanding that I had been used, manipulated, and discarded. My son wanted me to die. Well, maybe it was time to give him what he asked for. The next day, I woke with a mental clarity I hadn't had in years, determination replacing sorrow. If he wanted me gone, I would be, but not as he expected. I put on my best clothes and set out with purpose. First, the bank, where I closed our joint emergency account, transferring the $20,000 back to my personal account, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Next, the mortgage office, where I reviewed the cosigner agreement, learning that my history of covering payments and Sarah's recent job loss gave me rights to potentially reclaim the property. Then, my lawyer Benjamin Carter, an old friend who knew my sacrifices. I told him everything, the hurtful words, the coldness, and said I wanted to change my will completely. He was sorry, never thinking Michael capable of such a thing. I decided to leave everything to a veterans organization, set up a trust for my grandchildren that Michael couldn't touch until they were 25, and change all beneficiaries including my $100,000 life insurance policy. I also had him prepare documents to address the mortgage, as Sarah had lost her job again. Information Michael had given me without realizing its implications. Benjamin asked if I was sure I wanted to go that far. I said completely that my son told me his life would be easier without me, and I would disappear, but first make sure he understood what that meant. Leaving his office, I felt renewed, as if waking from a long dream. For 45 years, I had lived for Michael, but no more. Back home, I poured a whiskey, toasting my liberation, then called a travel agency about living in New Zealand, asking for all their information on how a 72-year-old could start anew. I stood at my window, looking at the city I'd lived in all my life, knowing it would soon be a memory. My son had asked for my disappearance as a gift, and I would grant it spectacularly. What he didn't know was that his wish was about to become a harsh lesson. He protested, saying he couldn't find one short notice, and since when did I charge to watch my grandchildren? I said since he told me his greatest gift would be my death, and if he wanted me gone, I was starting now. He laughed sarcastically, called it drama, and hung up. Perfect. Every interaction confirmed my decision. That afternoon, I withdrew $30,000 from my savings for my new life, called the travel agency, and booked a flight to Auckland for Tuesday, paying $5,000 without blinking, the best investment in years. On Thursday, my neighbor George visited, saying I looked different. He had witnessed my sacrifices, seeing me cancel plans for Michael, buy expensive things for him while I may do. I told him everything, the birthday horror, my plans. He couldn't believe Michael's cruelty and supported my decision to go to New Zealand. That night, I wrote the most important letter of my life, detailing every sacrifice, explaining the legal changes, and coldly informing Michael his life would now be his to manage. It was 23 pages of education, not bitterness. On Friday, packing my suitcases, I ignored Michael's calls. Saturday, Sarah came, desperate, saying Michael didn't mean it, that the kids needed me. I said he was clear, and I was respecting his wishes. She pleaded, but I said it was too late, closing the door and asking her to give the twins a hug. Sunday, I walked through my city's meaningful places: the factory, the park, the church, saying a silent goodbye to a life lived for others. That night, I couldn't sleep from excitement, not regret, feeling the anticipation of adventure at 70-to Monday at 5 a.m. George arrived with coffee and a smile. I was more than ready. He had my spare keys and a letter for Michael. We called a cab, and as my suitcases were loaded, I felt no nostalgia for my apartment, only freedom from a self-made prison. To the airport, I said, those words marking a new beginning.